This is Trista de Genova reading the Great Scroll of Banciao, edited by Trista de Genova and Zorro A. Star. Reality without the TV at its best, by Lone Wolf Press. A foreword to the Great Scroll of Banciao, 2nd edition. After distributing the first edition of the Great Scroll of Banciao, we promptly ran out. Hence the 2nd edition. Never in the history of the universe has there been anything quite like the Great Scroll of Banciao. While scroll scholars tend to agree that the Great Scroll is indeed a scroll, not all readers agree or indeed understand the contents. But the very special thing about the Great Scroll is, whether they understood it or not, it sure got people talking. It was without trepidation that we engaged in several conversations about the possibility of preparing a 2nd edition of the original text. The only question remaining was, when? After much preponderation, we decided that the best time to prepare the 2nd edition was now. So here it is now, and the Great Scroll of Banciao wrapped into one. Please enjoy. Zorro A. Star. This is a note from Noam Chomsky at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, February 9, 2005. Dear Trista, just a quick note of thanks for the Great Scroll, which the way life works, I'll have to put aside for now, along with just about everything else that arrives in a deluge. Glad to hear that things are working out well in Taiwan. Sincerely, Noam Chomsky. Afterward to the foreword of the introduction, our team of scroll scholars has requested the addition of a few cryptic words of introduction. We want to contextualize the ascent of the scroll within the locality of the modern history of reconsciousness, as well as describe a few real-time events that have occurred since the telepneumatic creed arrived that fateful moment in a smoky, run-down Banciao apartment. Gentle readers are encouraged to light a candle before they read the scroll, as it is affectionately known. It can also make but very distracting yet light reading in the metro. Enoch Toussaint, for one, missed his bus stop and ended up not getting off the bus until he'd finished. Enoch, I didn't get off until I finished. The Great Scroll has also come to serve as a divination tool at soirees where intellectuals congregate in various states of dress and decor. Readers may use the scroll to pose a question on any issue, no matter how trivial or pressing, and get a deeply philosophical answer by randomly opening the scroll copy to any page. It's really quite extraordinary. Check it out. Some scroll sections, such as the torture show, seem scarily omnipresent in 2005. The year torture has become, by all means and appearances, internationally sanctioned, even institutionalized. The disposability of journalists and the cartoon-like myriad of ever more bizarre methods of torture employed in perpetuity for the purpose of elections describe the American public's reaction when, as unexpectedly as the Spanish Inquisition, modern-day uber-totalitarianism reared its ugly head. This passage has to thank our dead benefactor, Monsieur Foucault, and a telepathic conference that took place within the unconscious of our teacher, Monsieur Baudrillard. As a historical note, the scroll's first outing came to a select few private collectors 2 years ago. Noam Chomsky, Dario Fo, Kurt Vonnegut, Terry Jones, City Lights Bookstore, and others. The scroll marketing team, run by deadbeat poets, decided unilaterally to follow Bukowski's advice from beyond and hired a team to arrange a 136-country tour and recruit actors and musicians to perform these pieces around the world. Ask your local bookstore owner about when the tourists are coming. Finally, it is interesting to note that in the past few years, the word okay has successfully entered the vocabulary of the Taiwanese-speaking people. Bonne lecture. Trista de Genova, MST, Oxford University, Executive Administrator, Scroll Management Team, Department of Administration Department, Radio Banqiao HQ, Taiwan, 106. January 06. Forward to the Great Scroll of Banqiao, 2nd edition. After distributing the first edition of the Great Scroll of Banqiao, we promptly ran out. Hence the 2nd edition. Introduction. How the Great Scroll of Banqiao was discovered. History is something you create. Recently, a team of linguistic forensic experts made an exciting archaeological discovery, what is now termed the Great Scroll of Banciao. The Great Scroll of Banciao was found in a rundown Banciao apartment after an inquisitive person happened to come across an old abandoned manhole, which is a pertinent thing to relate in the introduction. An earth tremblement cracked open this big hole in the ground, and everybody fell through to the secret dirt chamber therein. Who happened to be standing on that great manhole? There was a pretty big party going on. Those people were lost in time and space, or so we thought. As it turns out, they were just a little busy. When our team found the hole on a top shelf in the chamber was a scroll with icons that seemed unrecognizable and unbeknownst to all men, so that was why we then hired a woman. Okay, so where did this thing come from? It was determined, after much first vigorous then exhausting academic debate, which inevitably bankrupted our entire research budget for that fiscal year, that the scroll came from a hitherto little-known area, known only from a few anecdotal sources as the end of civilization. Further, we are led to conclude with 80% certainty that the function of the scroll was to serve as a sort of channel, CF canal, or a telepathic pneumatic tube, using electronic airwaves for its journey carrier. Experts at length determined that the Great Scroll was written by the spirits that flow through time. So what great secrets does the scroll reveal to the modern audience? Presumably you are referring to the Great Scroll of Banciao. This scroll reveals that spirits can flow through time via telepathic airwaves. They flow through our minds as vortexes of electrochemical energy. CF spirit, to Greek origins, meaning energy. We can pick up the flow of spirits via the web, through books, and, as we know now, through telepathic scrolls, icons, and, as we shall see, a certain special guitar riff, played only on one very, very special occasion by a young man named Jimmy. Further translation notes on the Great Scroll. First, since language was obliterated, it was necessary to determine which transliteration system to use for the translation, whether it be Hanyu Pinyin, Wade Giles, Juin, Fuhao, phonetic symbols, aka Bopomotha, the Yale system, and so on and so forth ad nauseum. It was finally decided in a long back-breaking meeting that ended with a tie-breaking vote that ended in picking straws that all forms of the language would necessitate being used, each in turn when referring to this monumental and landmark discovery. This is because only by using the whole range of possibilities could all the subtle nuances of the word come to its complete, actualized, full-bodied form. So the team adapted the process of inventing new ways of Romanizing Chinese words in general, that is, on a case-by-case basis. Anything goes, pretty much whatever amuses the translators at that particular moment in time, even shrouding the results in top secrecy. In fact, if a chaotic method like this one did not exist, this necessity called for its invention. It had to simulate the actual Chinglish that was spoken at that moment in time, which at every moment was being modified, hence the term modified Chinese. Come on, who cares? Just sound it out, okay? What did the Great Scroll actually say? An in-depth analysis of the scroll's preamble yielded the following interpretation. The wisdom of the ages, like water, flows through the quill to the eye. Thoth brings us the light of Ra. The old, all-seeing therapeutae bring us this scroll, map, compass, guides. It must be noted that water was the symbol of knowledge and information at the time, although the word was only invented in the 20th century by fanatical materialist scientists. As might be expected, the scroll was apparently intended to be read from beginning to end. On the scroll's opening scroll page, as we call it, are what appears to be universally known symbols and illustrations which serve as an ancient form of glossary. This initial section of the Great Banciao scroll was probably written as a linguistic calibrating tool. After much hair-pulling and face-scratching, the opening message of the Great Scroll of Banciao was loosely interpreted. The following examples are given: a cloud, a tortoise fashioned into a compass, a lightning bolt, a rat, or perhaps a mouse, someone carrying a basket or pot on their head, and a big steaming pile of dog shit. The symbols break down a little bit like this. Figure 1, symbol translation. Clouds, translate to bring. Lightning is transformation. Mouse means passage into manhood. Pig, to get rid of pig shit. Smiley face plus ankh means a happy priest. Ankh, to unlock the key of life. Boat, to be a sturdy boat vessel. Crocodile head, meaning in the crocodile infested. Water means waters. We figure the gist of the introductory scroll notes is as follows. Have the all-seeing Therapeutic given us this map? God bless. Amen. Final translation notes, Great Scroll. A few notes on translation must be noted. First, regarding the crocodile head symbol in Figure 1, it is no coincidence that it is a crocodile, a stark, ravingly obvious, at least to any real scholar of this sort of thing, symbol of Nile. Because of all of this transliteration confusion, a few of the passages were at first unintelligible to the team of experts, but eventually they were decoded as a form of what was known as modified Chinglish. The Great Scroll passages give evidence that during the epoch in question, the scroll was actually telepathied through time and space. Contextually speaking, modified Chinese was the only trace of the earliest form of language on Earth, built upon countless generations of chicken scratchings, carved into multifarious surfaces, which finally came to look a bit like Chinglish. Modified Chinglish then became the only written or spoken languages in existence because it was pictographic. It had pictures. Chinglish apparently had been brutally enforced, literally overnight. That is, the world's population was coerced into it, although they were completely oblivious to that fact. Besides writing a check mark on an X with one's finger, all other forms of written language were outlawed, as were all writing utensils save the smallest of golf pencils. There were no books, hence the scroll. The modern Chinglish language was made into a mandatory and exclusive lingua franca throughout the world for two primary reasons. One, it was the most impossible language to write since there were no more artists left. As a result, the ban on writing became self-enforcing. Secondly, a form of Chinese was chosen because as a second language it was the most grammatically mysterious and impossible to master. The power of Chinglish was thus unleashed as a weapon wielded over the masses. Chinglish's primary objective was to coerce people. This is why a form of English was used to enforce orders on the population. It was the more authoritarian and dictatorial language of the two. We would hazard an academic guess and say that Taiwanese was used to swear or have passionate discussions, since the method of its pronunciation was so mercurial. Through lifelong subtitles programming and Chinglish commands, the people remaining could read and understand just enough English to get by, but not really too much to say of any importance. They just did not know how to pronounce stuff, or write it for that matter. They could only read or speak modified Chinglish, which had neither form nor substance. So this is how a Romanized alphabet of some sort was found to be the lowest common denominator language and was systematically used to squelch the feminine. By this method, it was also easier to stymie the entire world into an environment of permanently dumbfounded, illiterate people. Meanwhile, of course, state production could be optimized if the last people on Earth were using a greater proportion of their brains to master the melodic four tones. A few contextual notes before we get cooking. Somehow everyone was contaminated by the virus. Over time, only a few citizen models, as they were called, had any notion of nature, literature, sex, work, snacks, hot showers, or self-determination. Man was predator at the top of a food chain with nowhere else to go but gone, and then to add injury to a major worldwide disaster hit. You would think that life for these organisms was reduced to remembering how to make soap or finding wood for fire and some skins to wear in winter. But surprise, people turned into sea animals, which was a good thing since otherwise we all would have drowned. As it turns out, the Earth's natural state when it wasn't spinning was covered in water evenly. The world had stopped turning. So anyone left on it who hadn't been flung off or drowned during the grand magnetic shake was on one side of the planet ever more cold. The other side of the world was piping hot. Most of a side of the earth was blown off, but on the other side, some people, all quadriplegics, were able to use their flippers to survive in the ocean, at least for a few years until they could start a family, and then find some land. People had to swim in the ocean for over 20 years. They developed goggles out of the shells and pieces of sea creatures. A host family of dolphins helped us adjust back to life in the ocean. Then the catfish men, as the dolphins called them, attacked and pillaged the dolphins for their resources and raped their women. When people crawled back out onto land, a small strange civilization soon sprouted along this 1-mile strip of the world, which was perpetually dusky. This people caught between night and day. Then they started making all the same mistakes again. We created another self-destructive society, prone to overpopulation, and then building armies. We were language. We were the virus. We couldn't help but develop a language. It was not the biology. It was not the economy. It was the genetic. Lots of survivors started dropping like flies of mysterious self-inflicted ailments that, as they were called, an epidemic of euthanasia-like symptoms. Of course, it became unknown that people were actually dying. With their passing, however, died all memories of things. The paper bomb destroyed all things like books, short stories, and poetry. Even tabloids, every last copy of every last romance novel on earth, and every comic book, they all disappeared. This is called a new beginning. From that time on, all books were burned and writing deemed heretical and punishable by death. Learning and scholarly activity in general became a liability to the United States, which became an all-encompassing and dangerous presence even to itself. All surviving records were annihilated by one dirty suitcase smart paperwork bomb concocted in a military lab, flung out a window at 20,000 feet by a pissed-off former enlisted member model, a Mr. Sergeant Pepper. Although he was initially decorated until he used the medals for toilet paper, at the heart of it all, he felt thwarted during the course of his all-too-brief military career. He was also fed up with being sexually mauled during boot camp initiation ceremonies. His superiors reported that he lacked an esprit de corps. To the rest of the world, he was just some revolting army guy. This was the first and last time the military had done us all a favor, even indirectly. But now we were faced with an army of military bureaucrats with nothing to do, and all the time in the world to think of new ways to destroy everybody. Anyway, the gas from the dirty suitcase paperwork bomb proliferated, drifted up and up as far as the outer edges of the stratosphere, and after about 10 minutes it turned all of the air cobalt blue. It was really stunning. Interestingly, it destroyed all the paperwork everywhere in the world, except this one scroll, which at the last moment was flung through time and space with the help of a particularly groovy guitar riff. Otherwise, the bomb was a dud, which actually backfired, as it didn't do much more than destroy all the red tape in the world and then turn the air cobalt blue, much like the Mediterranean of old. So anyway, this is why we have spectacular sunsets. After all the initial panic, it almost seems to be a lovely surprise. Then all of a sudden, everybody turned into this pretty blueberry color. We were hardly prepared for the blast of color that illuminated our black and white, newly drab world. You see, somewhere along the way, as a race, we'd lost our ability to see in color. It must have been the sea-goggle eyes, which had now become a part of our anatomy. We could only see in black and white, and even the rumor of color would now throw us into a tempestuous fit of jealousy and vituperous irritability. Despite this sole beautiful phenomenon, fewer and fewer people existed in the first place because they secretly began dying out from a combination of disastrous factors that just happened to happen at the wrong time. The magnetic pole switched, and then there was this big flood. Again. Oh, I already said that. The worst-case scenario was, unsurprisingly, finally realized. As one grandma said, once in a while you have to expect the worst case. Expect the worst, and sometimes you won't be disappointed. People lost access to the few centuries of knowledge and learning they had managed to acquire over a relatively short time of 6 millennia or so. It was an incredibly accelerated unlearning curve that ended in scavenged and renovated office spaces. Some stuff was stowed in boxes in a mountain cave somewhere, but the point is we don't know exactly where our culture is now. We forgot, because the map got wet. So people went back to wearing animal skins and living in their cardboard homes and pointing at stuff saying things like, ooga, 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 oh, oh, ooga, oh. There were no things like cups to drink out of. They couldn't measure anything worth a damn and went back to trading bits of rubbish for rat skins. Over time, only a handful of people in the world were still old enough to remember what books were at all. You wouldn't think someone had heard of a book, but in fact, if you were looking for a bit of light reading and you said you wanted to find a book to them, they would invariably try to repeat you, but say something weird and uncomprehending like bookus. Believe you me, they were tested about this on numerous occasions under carefully controlled testing conditions, and what with no books, the constant surveillance, and the banning of any form of education whatsoever, people fell into the easy habit of just murmuring to themselves in conversational Chinese, with no thoughts or desire to read, or to write history for that matter. only to coerce. People began writing again only when they realized how much they missed Shu Fa. This scroll takes place circa somewhere around the end of that time period. Thus concludes the foreword, introduction to the foreword, etc., etc. Stay tuned for Chapter 1.